Thousands of years ago, people crossed deserts, sailed unknown oceans, and climbed mountain ranges, not for gold, not for conquest, just to get their hands on specific rocks, shells, and tree sap. The distances involved will genuinely shock you. Obsidian is volcanic glass. It fractures into edges so sharp they can outperform modern surgical steel. And roughly 12,000 years ago, people wanted it badly enough to carry it hundreds of miles on foot. The most striking example comes from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. A single volcanic source near the ancient site of Catalhook was producing obsidian that archaeologists have now traced to settlements across the entire Fertile Crescent: Cyprus, Jordan, northern Syria. These are neighboring towns. Some of those sites sit over 800 kilometers from the source. And here's the part that makes you stop and think: there were no roads, no wheeled carts at this point. These were people carrying obsidian nodules by hand or on the backs of animals, through terrain that was not gentle, across territories occupied by other groups who were not always friendly. Why? Because the alternative, flint, was everywhere, but it was worse. Obsidian was simply better at cutting, scraping, and butchering. People recognized quality, and they moved mountains, literally, to access it. Archaeologists can now chemically fingerprint obsidian and trace it back to specific volcanic flows. What they've found is a trade network that was already sophisticated and continent-spanning before writing existed, before cities existed, before most of what we call civilization. Someone was moving product across Anatolia and the Levant when humans were still hunting mammoths. The really unsettling implication: this wasn't survival. Flint worked. Obsidian was a preference, a technological preference that people were willing to invest enormous effort and risk to satisfy. That's not so different from how we behave today, is it? There is one place on Earth where high-quality lapis lazuli naturally occurs in large quantities. 1. The Badakhshan mines in northeastern Afghanistan, tucked into the Hindu Kush Mountains at elevations above 6,000 feet. Now look at where lapis lazuli shows up in the ancient world. Egyptian pharaohs had it. Mesopotamian kings decorated their temples with it. It turned up in Minoan Crete, in the Indus Valley, in ancient Sumer. King Tutankhamun's death mask, that iconic blue and gold image, is blue because of lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. The overland distance from the Badakhshan mines to Egypt is roughly 5,000 kilometers. That route crossed the Persian Plateau, the Zagros Mountains, Mesopotamia, the Levant, and the Sinai Desert. And that was the trade path. They actually did it. Lapis became so desirable because that specific shade of deep, luminous blue was almost impossible to replicate with any other material available in the ancient world. It didn't fade. It didn't change color. It looked like a piece of the night sky, and that carried enormous spiritual weight across every culture that encountered it. By 3000 BC, organized lapis trade was already old. The supply chain running from Afghanistan to the Mediterranean was established and functioning before most of the civilizations we associate with antiquity had even formed their writing systems. What's remarkable is that the traders in the middle, moving lapis through Iran, through Mesopotamia, didn't necessarily know where it originated or where it was going. It passed through dozens of hands. Everyone along the route understood they were holding something rare and took their cut accordingly. It is the first luxury commodity in recorded human history, and its entire existence depended on someone making a journey that most modern tourists would find daunting even with a plane ticket. Amber is fossilized resin. It comes predominantly from trees that lived around the Baltic Sea roughly 44 million years ago. The deposits wash up on shores in what is now Denmark, Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia. Ancient Greeks called it electron and believed it was solidified sunlight. Ancient Romans imported it so heavily that during Nero's reign, a single piece of amber could be worth more than a healthy enslaved person. and Mycenaean Greeks, who lived in Bronze Age Greece around 1600 BC, were buried with amber beads that came from the Baltic, over 2,000 kilometers away. The route amber took from the Baltic coast to the Mediterranean is now called the Amber Road, and it's one of the oldest trade arteries in European history. It roughly followed river systems south through Central Europe, eventually connecting to Adriatic ports and then onward by sea. Here's what makes this genuinely strange. Amber has no practical use. You cannot eat it, farm with it, build with it, or cut anything with it. It is purely decorative and spiritual. People were walking 2,000 miles to trade for tree sap because it was pretty, and it carried an aura of mystery. Amber also has the unusual property of generating static electricity when rubbed, which is literally where the word electricity comes from. Ancient people noticed this. A material that crackled and sparked with invisible force that looked like captured sunlight that came from the edge of the known world. Of course they wanted it. The Amber Road wasn't informal either. By the Roman period, it was an organized commercial route with established waypoints, known prices, and professional traders who made their living exclusively moving amber south and Roman manufactured goods north. All of that infrastructure built around fossilized tree resin. Bronze is harder than copper. Bronze holds an edge better than copper. Bronze changed warfare, agriculture, and construction so fundamentally that we named an entire age after it. And bronze is an alloy, roughly 90% copper, 10% tin. Copper was relatively widespread in the ancient world. Tin was not. The tin deposits that powered Bronze Age civilization in the Mediterranean and Near East appear to have come from places as distant as Cornwall in southwestern Britain, central Afghanistan, and possibly parts of Central Asia. For Mesopotamia and Egypt to maintain bronze production, they needed a continuous supply of tin from somewhere very far away. The exact sourcing is still debated by archaeologists, but trace element analysis of Bronze Age tin artifacts has pointed repeatedly toward deposits that are simply not close to where the objects were found. Cornwall, specifically, is a remarkable case. British tin was likely moving through France, then across the Mediterranean in the later Bronze Age. Greek and Phoenician traders both made the journey to Britain's southwestern tip, a voyage that took them beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we call the Strait of Gibraltar, into open Atlantic waters that most ancient sailors treated as the edge of the world. The Phoenician merchant Hamilcar reportedly made this voyage around 500 BC specifically for tin. Celtic traders at the other end understood exactly what they had and negotiated accordingly. Without that tin reaching the Mediterranean, Bronze Age civilization doesn't function at the scale it did. The weapons don't get made, the tools don't get forged, the monuments don't get built. The entire infrastructure of the ancient world ran on a supply chain that stretched from the Atlantic coast of Britain to the banks of the Euphrates, and most of the people whose lives depended on it had absolutely no idea where tin actually came from. Obsidian, lapis, amber, tin, for materials, for impossible journeys. One conclusion: humans have always been willing to go absurd distances for the things they value. If this kind of deep history is your thing, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.